Well, communism or cronyism, how is Cuba really run today? Fidel Castro, who died on Friday, was an icon of communism, but the island is far from a utopian, classless society. In fact, Cuba's economy is largely run by the military, and that's controlled by the Castro family. Our editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, has spent the day with people intimately familiar with how business is run on the island and reports from just across the water in Miami.
Cuba! The
Comandante might be dead, but his business interests are booming. And much of the Castro family's ventures are closely held by Gaesa, the commercial wing of the Cuban military. Gaesa controls around 40% of the country's economy. Some financial analysts put that number even higher, at around 80%. It's heavily armed and capitalist element embedded in the country's communist elite. And it keeps the big money in the hands of the state and the Castro family. The man in charge is Major General Luis Alberto Rodriguez, President Raul Castro's son-in-law. He's rarely photographed, and few outside the regime's elite have ever heard of him. Rodriguez is also the bookie's favorite to become the next president of Cuba. The reason, of course, is money. Cuba's aiming for $2 billion a year in foreign direct investment, and Rodriguez will be the gatekeeper for all that money. The military conglomerate has grown during Raul Castro's decade in power, and Jose Fernandez is uniquely familiar with the growth of Gaesa. He's a real estate developer and has been doing business in Cuba since 1995.
Gaesa is very important because Gaesa is handling the most important hotel projects and construction projects. They have a lot of autonomy and the money to get things done and pay for it.
Yet Gaesa rules the Cuban roost, and it operates mostly in secret. It owns almost all the retail chains, more than 50 hotels from Havana to the Caribbean beaches, and the Mariel Foreign Trade Zone, poised to handle U.S. cargo if and when that trade embargo is lifted.
There's no doubt that Cuba is open for investment, so long as those bringing all those Yankee dollars aren't fussy about doing business with a holding company owned by Cuba's military and managed by the heirs of Fidel Castro. Craig Copetas, TRT World, Miami.
And Craig joins us live now from Miami. Craig, thank you for joining us once again here on Money Talks. I just wanted to ask you about the military and how its tentacles go so deeply into the economy. How did it start?
It started shortly after the revolution, Matthew, when a fellow by the name of Julio Casas, who was a banker, an actuary, he helped invade the island with Fidel, and he became essentially the Che Guevara of bookkeeping. He put together the Cuban economy, tinkered with it. He was the accountant. And about 10 years ago, before his death, he sent out teams around the world to find out the best way to generate a new economy while keeping socialism. And what you see now is the result, the Chinese model, where the military has its own corporate structure and a great deal of the money comes through the military.
Craig, you mentioned in your report it was sort of like a heavily armed conglomerate, and we know that within the military we have different departments. For example, the Gaviota is the military's tourism arm and is actually building hotels at a faster rate than the civilian agencies like the Ministry of Tourism. So you have within the military different departments running things.
Right. These are essentially wholly owned military subsidiaries. The Air Force will have a piece of the action. The Navy will have a piece of the action. In fact, every aspect of the Cuban military will have a piece of the action. However, Matthew, all of it is going to be closely held and controlled by the chairman of Gaesa. And guess who that is? That's General Rodriguez.
And as I understand it, they who run things are actually quite capitalist-minded. They're looking for international investment and investors.
Actively seeking, and the problem is is that the Americans still feel that they are being left out because a lot of those sanctions still exist. The deals that Gaesa has been doing for many decades right now have been with the Canadians, the Europeans, and the Latin Americans. So if Donald Trump follows through on his threats to re-sanction or put the sanctions back on Cuba, the Americans are going to be left out, and that's causing a lot of consternation here in Miami right now, because a lot of the Cuban-American community, as well as a lot of the big American companies, want to get in there. And right now, they're not only fearful of Trump, but they're also kind of fearful of whether or not they should do business with a company that's owned by guys who have tanks and jet planes and bombers and a lot of guns.
Okay, Craig, well, that's a good place to leave it, looking forward towards Donald Trump and his presidency. Thanks for that from Miami.